Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Cyber Pass. I am here today on the Cyber Pass all alone with my co-host, the Ogre. We seem to have been abandoned by the Common Sense guy today, or, I'm being cruel. I'm assuming the Common Sense guy is somewhere stretched out listening to this, throwing things at his laptop as we speak.
He probably is.
He has been struck down by a similar thing, only yet more extreme, that I had a week or two ago, and that is a very bad back. So sadly, we have to do without him today. Do you think we shall manage that, Mr. Ogre?
I think we'll probably, yeah. I mean, we'll find a way. I'm not saying it'll be easy. No, God save us. It is easy to become attached to someone, especially when they do a good job. So I don't know. I'm not going to kiss his ass. He's out. I do see one thing though, Brett. I'm thankful for this. We have out in the chat RPR, and maybe we'll get a couple of the other old timers up in here and just help us out. I'm not going to lay down any rules or anything like this, but the Britisher will probably usually leave this to me. Be nice to each other in the way that everything's good except for swastikas and dick pics.
Yes, that almost sounded as though you were out of what was it? What was that Keanu Reeves early movie where they always ended up saying "be excellent to each other" and "party on, dudes"?
Bill and Ted.
Bill and Ted. Yes, thank you. Yes,
certainly.
But no, I did catch some of your conversation with the Common Sense guy, where you kind of mentioned marijuana and how that was good for pain, and that, we should just take some of that. Whereby, of course, he was then obliged to inform you that it's actually illegal over here. And that is just the thing, that it has always been illegal over here, and there is no imminent sign of it changing. Theresa May is a bit of a martinet in that regard, and I think as long as we have her as Prime Minister, it's very much a matter of over my dead body. So I was just wondering whether you had anything to say on that subject, given your expertise in the field.
Well, I don't know if I'm an expert, but I will say this. Number one, the empirical evidence, the anecdotal evidence that I have to offer is that marijuana does not relieve pain. It can cause release from some types of stress headaches, stress, fatigue, and muscle stress. Now, stress, mind you, and I don't mean stress from overwork. I mean stress from the cabeza, from your head. And so that's just, it's not per se a good pain relief, but the same science that found that also strongly suggests that, let's say if you do have a bad back, not a joke, but like, oh, I can't freaking hardly breathe, let alone think of getting up and going to the ice box from the settee. Can't even make it. Well, I mean, at that point, it can help you go to that other place in your mind that will allow you to deal with that very real pain that you feel. You see what I mean? I hope that makes sense. But the idea that it's illegal there, oh my good Lord. For one thing, I do believe in England, as they do here, they still prescribe children things like Ritalin, Adderall, if they have ADHD or whatever, and they will not think of prescribing a child with those things, marijuana, or if they have seizures. There's actually a disease where people hiccup all the time. It's not often, but it happens. One of the only cures for it is medical cannabis. I don't like to say medical marijuana, Britisher. Marijuana means local weed. It's something that's, they have tried to take away from the relevance of this very beneficial plant in so many different ways. Cannabis is one of the only things where we have cannabis receptors, cannabinoid receptors pre-built in our brains, just like we have opiate receptors. Now, of course, people say, well, you're drawing a comparison with opiates and marijuana. Is it addictive like it is? No. Actually, the way that it affects the mind when you are satiated, when these when these cannabinoid receptors are satiated with the influx of cannabinoids, i.e. THC, CBDs, these kind of things. And there's a plethora of others that come from cannabis also. They're not all just THC and CBD 1 and 2 and tetrahydrocannabinol 12 and 18. It's not just those things. I think there's 180 that we know psychoactive components with this plant, cannabis. Let me make one other point too, is this seems to be a little rambling because I'm trying to pack a lot of things into one thought. And for someone that's not on the same page or doesn't know these things, it may go here and there. So if I could make one specific point, Britisher, forget about pain relief, forget about cannabinoid receptor satiation, forget about the benefits it has with anti-carcinogenic, all of these things, forget about all of that. And let's consider that cigarettes are widely legal and tobacco are widely legal the world over. They also are somewhere upwards of 180 compounds that are psychoactive. There's not one of them that we know that is beneficial. You could say nicotine because it increases synaptic function. It does increase alertness. You could say that in some ways this thing benefits you, just like caffeine, though. See what I mean? There's no, like, it doesn't make you live longer.
Well, over here, they, I think it was under Gordon Brown, they set up a royal commission. That's one of the things they sometimes do when they actually want, advice from the scientists. So they set up a royal commission to basically bring in all the leading scientists on the subject who can then advise the government on a given subject. So they did that actually on drugs policy. And it was led by the wonderfully named Professor Nutt. And eventually the Royal Commission reported back. And what they effectively had done is they had created a scale of harm whereby they effectively laid out one drug after the other in ascending order. And much to the government's annoyance, of course, they had set cannabis lower than both tobacco and alcohol on that level. I think even ecstasy was ranked lower than alcohol but higher than tobacco.
What by ecstasy you mean MDMA, which is also a psychoactive drug that has absolutely no physical problems that we know of whatsoever to the
well, yes, I mean, I think something like at its height, something like 1 million of those tablets were consumed at weekends here in Britain.
Yeah, so, with no ill effects other than some kids got laid.
Well, once in a while, someone would die for having a reaction to it. But given that they were basically testing it on the millions, the fact that one person once in a while would have a reaction actually only just showed how much safer than advertised by the government the drug actually was. But when it comes to the Royal Commission, of course, Gordon Brown's wise choice, his Solomonic judgment, was to fire them all. So he just basically got rid of the Royal Commission because he didn't like what they were actually saying. So the government had asked them for advice, and then when the scientists returned and said, okay, this is our advice, this is the way we see it, their chief advice, aside from showing this scale in which they basically said the law should effectively apply punitive measures according to this scale, aside from that, they also said that basically drugs and drug addiction should be seen as a health problem and not a criminal problem. That effectively we should be dealing with it from a health aspect of the general population, rather than just merely something that, martinets of the Home Office seek to punish. Which again,
what about the selling? What about the selling of drugs? Then that was all. But because I agree, man. In fact, I don't want to. I'm not trying to get you. Gotcha. I'm just saying. So, what about the selling of drugs? The trafficking?
Well, I mean, chances are there would still be some illegality involved there, in just the same way as you aren't allowed to sell medication unlicensed.
It should be a health problem. I really don't know what to say. Drugs should be decriminalized. If the government can't find an efficient way to distribute drugs to people that want them, well, then we should remember I could go to so many philosophers, Britisher. It doesn't really, it's ridiculous. To try to ban and make contraband what the populace desires is futility. Forget it.
Well, I mean, when it comes to something like cannabis, you, of course, also have the problem here in Britain that you are basically being sent to the heroin dealer to buy your cannabis. You know, so if anybody does want to buy this much lesser drug, they basically have to go to the criminal fraternity, who will also try and sell them cocaine or heroin.
You know, and years of buying marijuana, years before it was legal, years of it, going back to 15 years old, man, going back to bloody 1990. I've never went to a weed dealer's house that had heroin, Britisher, or methamphetamine, or anything but weed.
I mean,
the weed dealer sold weed, and I understand that
yeah.
argument, but it just doesn't wash.
No, but just to give you an idea what we're talking about here, because once upon a time here in Britain, the cannabis trade was largely in the hands of old hippies. And the police in every location really knew who the local cannabis dealer was. So these people were known, they were completely harmless. And the police effectively let them be because they thought them harmless. They thought, what was the problem with them? What happened then was Michael Howard. So this is the end of the Conservative government under John Major, just before we went into Tony Blair. And what Michael Howard decided was that he wanted to make his name for himself as someone who basically was, you know, very tough on crime. So on hearing that the police forces really all over the country knew who these people were and were not arresting them, he insisted they all be arrested at once and prosecuted and locked away. This, of course, occurred, and Michael Howard got his way, and he looked very good in the Daily Mail, and he could once again show that the prosecution figures on drugs had gone up and that he was doing a stern job. Of course, what he had thereby done is removed pretty much 100% of the supply of an existing market. So everybody knows how this works. If you suddenly remove the supply, someone else will come in and supply the market instead. So what happened was that very violent gangs moved into the market here in Britain. And these were largely the existing drugs gangs. And what furthermore happened was they basically start setting up growing houses here in Britain, where basically marijuana is being grown under, you know, under heat lamps 24/7. And they are staffing these houses, which more often than not are locked from the outside, with illegal immigrants whom they have gained control of and have trafficked into the country and are effectively using as slaves. So the whole situation surrounding marijuana has gone in Britain from it being the old hippie who grew it somewhere in a barn and really everybody knew about it. It has gone from that to now being in the hands of very, very violent gangs, more often than not involved in heroin and cocaine trade.
Well, now there's the problem that you have. Now, I would just say that when it breaks down to the street level, though, I want to say this again. When it breaks down to the distribution level, the heroin, the methamphetamine, the cocaine, all these things go in different hands than the marijuana. They really do end up being distributed by different people. Now, am I being an apologist for the black market? No, I'm saying that all these things should be absolutely decriminalized. And if the government can't handle the distribution of it, then let the same markets that handle it now handle it. They just won't have to kill people because it won't be illegal. They won't lose so much over the border. The price will go down. They can still make a fortune.
You've got a point to an extent there, but in a way, you just prevented me from making a point that you actually would tend to agree with, and that is to my view.
I'm not sorry, but I just jumped in from all that talk, Britt. Go ahead.
You actually just wanted to hear me. You want to hear me say something you can actually agree with for once, don't you? Um, in that particular example with Michael Howard, it was a classic example of the government actually making things worse. If the government would have just kept its nose out of it, then the cannabis trade here in Britain would still be a rather placid affair in the hands of old hippies. And it was actually the intervention by the government, it was the intervention by the state that made things much worse. And now we basically have got the situation we're in, and no one quite knows exactly how to get out of it. But yes, sometimes, I mean, you know that I have sometimes on your stream said that, yes, there are certain things for which we need the state. But once in a while, yes, I will agree, it is the state who actually makes things worse. So I just hope that we can at least agree on that one.
Yeah, well, we agree on a lot more stuff than people would probably know, Britt.
Oh, no, don't tell them, please.
Yeah. No, I'd ruin the whole facade. But I will say on this, I'm not sure you agree with me fully on that. I would stand for this idea. No prohibition on leisure time drugs and activities. If my leisure time drug and activity doesn't directly affect you, i.e., I come steal your lawnmower or mug your mother or father on their way to the market for their money. If I'm not doing those things, if I'm providing my own for these substances, I believe that no, there should be no law prohibiting any kind of drug use. And well, there's so many bad connotations, and I'm going to kick it off right here, but there's so many bad connotations put on it, Britisher. I mean, it's, you're a druggie, you're a junkie, but they don't. I would think of Dr. Dean Nadell, a very famous old radio guy from days of yore, if anybody's not heard of him. And he would always, I believe he used heroin. I'm not sure he ever came out and said it, but he definitely was defending it in the 80s and 90s when it was very unpopular to say. As a doctor, he would say this. Do you know how many doctors I know that go in the back room after a hard day and, shoot up a little morphine or a little Dilaudid or something like that because they have access to it? They can, and they're not scum of the earth. So anyway, there you go. I just believe that the stigmas put on it are the biggest part of the problem.
Well, I mean, it comes back to that famous Bill Hicks skit, doesn't it? That you never hear the story about the person who just took some heroin and his life did not fall apart. But yes, when it comes to drugs, I am in a way in the same camp as you are, that basically would say, look, just legalize it. I mean, the whole war on drugs thing has been a complete debacle. It has toppled some countries into a nigh on a civil war. I mean, look at Mexico or Colombia. And at the same time, there doesn't seem to be any way of winning this. I mean, it seems to just be getting worse. Whenever we hear about some record haul of drugs being captured, that should always actually tell us that the volumes are going up, not that the police are actually getting more efficient at catching it. But given that you have to start somewhere, and given that I think it is unlikely that in the near future the prohibition of drugs will stop, I think then you have to at least try and get your little incremental victories. And in my mind, that should be cannabis, because I just do not see, and I am speaking as someone who has never consumed a drug in my life, and I have actually no interest, no curiosity in that regard. But just looking at it, I just do not see why it should be illegal. So I feel that if one does set up a royal commission to look into these things, and the royal commission comes back with findings saying, I'm sorry, but this thing is harmless, then whom should I believe? The prime minister or the scientists who are actually telling me about it? And I would just side with the scientists, I'm afraid.
Yeah, you always have to defer. And how tragic is it, Britisher, that so rarely do our beloved prime ministers and whatnot, Mrs. Run, Yell, and Tell, what a tragedy is it that so rarely that what they believe, what they say, and what they stand for lines up with science. Not common sense, because you know how I feel about common sense, right, sir? There's no such thing.
Well, I mean, I think in this regard, one of the problems we have is that politicians are always about 20 or 30 years behind the curve, because before, we always basically have to go back to the time before they entered the political bubble. So before they basically dedicated their entire life to following the party line and climbing the greasy pole. So that is when their opinions and their views were actually formed. One of our problems with that, therefore, is, of course, that times move on. And in a lot of cases, you will find that the population, by and large, has long since moved on from battles that the politicians are still fighting. So you can have kind of outdated left-wing views being presented in Parliament or in Congress, which are doing battle with outdated right-wing views. And meanwhile, the public are hearing all this and just thinking, this is a Punch and Judy show from 20 years ago. Why are these people still talking about it? So I think particularly also when it comes to drugs, our politicians are really 20 or 30 years behind the curve from where the general population as such is.
And you got to ask yourself why. Is it only for votes? I mean, why would they? Or is it just because these people, by the time society deems them to be, you know, academic and you know, litigious and you know, the status is high enough at this age to now be, you know, to rise to the status of public servant, British. You know, is that part of the problem, that we put this such a lofty mark on public service that in a lot of cases it could be done by folks much younger that may do it better? I mean, I think, could that be part of the problem?
Well, I think it is also that we attribute wisdom to age, so that we actually like our politicians with a bit of patina on them, as opposed to real young bucks, so to speak. But the side effect of that is that, yes, they may be a little wiser, but it also means that their opinions have been formed decades ago.
Decades ago.
So that always sort of represents a bit of a problem, because the population, when you take the average of the age of the population, tends to therefore always be much younger than the politicians who then eventually manage to get to the highest office. So I think therein lies some of the problem.
Yeah.
But I think it is also perhaps that, you know, what kind of people does, as you said before in such a lovely tone, being a public servant, what kind of people does that actually attract? I mean, we have to kind of wonder whether it doesn't already attract sociopaths right from the start. And I think there are quite a few politicians who do, they would never admit to it, of course, but they do get a kick out of being in a position whereby they can tell people what to do. And
yeah, they're the hall monitors of yore.
Yes, precisely. And therefore, being able to deny people something, or being able to order people to do things, does more than likely have a certain attraction to them. So they more than likely have the feeling that if they're dealing with things that aren't vital to the functioning of society, where they really don't have a choice, so basically, if it is something absolutely vital, then they can't intervene, because then they've immediately lost the next election. But if it is something petty, if it is something fairly small, then they can kind of enjoy the execution of their personal power. So I think there is an element of that. It's kind of, it's the same thing as, you know, watching a man change once you give him a peak cap, a notepad, and make him a parking attendant. And suddenly, now that he has got the ability to fine people and exert power on them, telling them to move their vehicle, then you will suddenly see him turn from, you know, a fairly small person suddenly into Napoleon. And I think politicians often suffer from that. The
Often,
moment they have,
man,
yeah,
that so makes me think of the Kids in the Hall. It was a Canadian comedy troupe that was relatively popular in the United States and Canada in the early and mid 90s. And there was a skit they did, and it was called oh, now I'm going to completely lose it, because he's like, I have a monochrome of power. But there was this dude in the office that just got promoted just a tiny bit to like requisitions, paper requisitions or whatnot. And oh Lord, it was just a really, the Canadians and the Canadians kind of stole from you. In fact, I'm not sure if you watch Canadian comedy, but the cringe factor is different, but it's still there. A lot of the comedy is based on, oh, you're feeling for the person, you know, and it's like so strange. But I tell you what, that oh, I'm still not going to be able to say it either. I could see his head saying, I am overcome with power, my monochrome of power. And
he
man,
was he was literally Moses coming down from Mount Sinai with the stone tablets, was he? Because
yes, yes. And of course
he's been given the right over paper requisitions.
yes, and the skit ends with the moron being fired. He's like drawn back into the office, and instead of even being taken down to the level that he was before, he's just like, look, we just can see that after we've given you this tiny bit of power. They use the word power as often as I think they can in the skit. Power.
Yeah.
You know, we have to let you go. But anyway, yes, and the world is full of people that way. And here's the biggest problem that I have, Brett. I think with that, I think it over very seriously, but the Sargon, a friend of mine that served in the Vietnam conflict on the American side years ago, and we were talking one day, and it was, if you were in trouble 40 years ago for something, I don't mean even minor, you know, you may have stolen a car or who knows, but you've done something bad now and you're Mr. Tough Guy. The judge may look at you and say, you got two choices. Go to the Marines and get through basic training. Oh, you do your time, you know, you do your 3 years or whatever it is that you sign up for, or you go right to prison, or go to prison now. You know, they don't do that anymore. They have gone so far away from getting people that actually can be governed if they have the right kind of leadership, i.e. police and military leadership, you dig it, or going to just someone that can pass the sniff test. And look, Britisher, every time I'm in trouble, I don't want the bobbies that come on to help me in my trouble to pass the bloody sniff test. You know what I mean? You know, at 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, on some side street, you know, in North London, I want the bobby to come by. I don't, what the test I want them to pass is that they're going to be able to help me and whoop a little ass if they need to. That's it.
Well, I mean, given that we're talking about people who might go off their heads a little on power or the ability to exert power, this might bring us quite elegantly to the next item here. And that is, of course, that there has been another bomb attack here in Britain, in London. Or to be more precise, there has been another attempted bomb attack, which went somewhat askew because the explosives didn't properly go off. It was interesting. You know, we've had people on the BBC being interviewed, talking about, you know, how there was a fireball, how they suffered some flash burns and so on, but as such, there doesn't seem to be anybody very seriously injured. I believe there was some woman who may have had her legs burnt, but again, that was more than likely flash burns. Now, it was explained that, you know, normally if you have sort of burns, it's that your flesh has been exposed, your skin has been exposed to heat for, you know, quite a long time. Whereas in this case, it seemed to have been a fraction of a second, but very intense heat. due to some chemical going off in this bomb, but failing to actually detonate and cause a blast. So right now the police are looking through all the CCTV cameras and whatever, so they're quite confident that they will very soon have pictures of somebody carrying a particular bag into a tube station, and they'll more than likely, following the CCTV cameras, being able to trace him all the way onto the train and out, if you know what I mean. Whether they will actually provide them with good enough picture material to identify him is another question, because as we all know, these CCTV camera shots usually just show us a silhouette of somebody who can be referred to as someone. I don't think any of us, Mr. Ogre, will be overly surprised if it emerges that this particular person is of an Asian complexion and has a beard. Would you be overly shocked at that?
No, they said it's probably a terror attack, but I'm just going to say that while we consider this a small amount of power, as you segued into this situation with, I vehemently disagree with you. It's time that we stopped looking at it as some moron with their holy weapon in their underpants, Brett. As I look at, hammer attacks on 2 women with a man screaming Allahu Akbar. This coming out of the what is this here? The Daily Star. Say what you want about the Daily Star, but they don't put out news that's not true. There was a knife attack, I believe, in France today. Being that we can't go a week without these things happening, I really think it's time that something give. And because I keep saying it, we're not dealing with religion, and in your country, I'm not sure that freedom of religion is even protected. I'm not even sure that's the case. But we're not dealing with religion here. We're dealing with a religio-political, sociological movement that, at base, wants to transform society, wants to transform religion, because even though you don't go to the C of E, if you had to pick one bloody church, I can guarantee it would be the C of E, would it not, Britisher? I mean, good Lord. If you absolutely had to pick, not that would ever happen. I don't even want you to answer that, because I know you're an atheist. You're at best an agnostic. But these things we need to realize that where we're at right now, we don't need to take them too seriously in their organization, but we need to take seriously the amount of power that they are exerting on us societally and physically. I mean, it's day in and day out, hammer attack, knife attack, how to put your makeup on once you've had an acid attack. These are videos, Brett, that are not satire.
Yes,
once you've
had acid, I was aware of that one with the makeup and the burns. Yes, that was one of the most bizarre BBC pieces that has ever been put out. Yes.
No, and I was running out of gas. I was running out of helium there. I'm just saying that I'm not taking away from what you preach day in and day out, that we can't take them too seriously. Look at what they do. Look at who they are. Look at their, I mean, here's more fodder for you, Brett. Let's face it. This will probably make it to the week that was. And you will, in your very posh and pompous way, be like, look at this moron. What a jackass. Thought that he would say Allah and put a burning bomb that wouldn't bloody go off on the tube. You know what I mean? I'm sure. But don't we, at what point and with what magnification do we have to start putting the lens of scrutiny on these people?
To be honest, I would look completely elsewhere. I think as a society, our problem is in its majority not so much to be identified in what they're doing. It is in what we're doing. And now this is just before anybody thinks, oh, well, I'm saying that we are doing things that are causing them to blow themselves up. No. People who kind of indulge in that sort of apologism for the terrorists. I mean, they can go and jump up off the end of Brighton Pier. I mean, those people cannot be helped. But I think, you know, we make a lot of statements like we would want these people to assimilate. And we know we have a problem in that respect. Or, well, I mean, I say we know. I think some of us know that we have a problem in that respect. I think there are still a great many in society who still deny that there is actually a problem, which is bizarre when you've got bombs going off. But in order to even aid assimilation, even if that it would be your main goal, the first and foremost thing that I think a nation needs to be able to do, and that includes all nations of Europe who are in a way facing the same problem, is to be able to identify what they themselves actually are, what they represent, to have a sense of national identity. But it is precisely that which seems to be challenged from all sides these days. If you want to be British, if you want to be the Britisher, you are obviously automatically a Nazi and a fascist and a racist and no end of things.
Oh Lord. And of course, because of your stances on the facts of the bell curve, as Murray's bell curve, all these things, and how you stand up against, of course, you're not only that, but I just want to let you continue, but I want you to remember, you're not only a racist, you're also, sir, a sexist, you're a bloody homophobe, you, sir, are a piece of crap hanging on the butt of society for your opinions, right and scientific as that may be.
I am the lowest of the low, and I'm proud of it.
I'm sorry.
But this is precisely the an illustration of that point, Mr. Ober. Exactly what you said there, that we seem to be challenging the very foundations of what we regard as being our own identities as people. Now, in America, you still seem to have a stronger sense of what it means to be American, but I think you are also aware that it is being challenged like mad from certain sectors at the moment. That some people say that it is deliberate undermining. I don't think it is deliberate undermining. Sometimes these trends can set in and there is not really an active agent in charge steering it, but it nonetheless happens. And I think that the best response to these things is to basically, for the nations in which this is occurring to kind of re-strengthen their identities. That doesn't mean that we just dissolve into some blind practice of flag waving and singing national anthems. That's not it. It's just basically being able to say, we are French, we are German, we are Belgian, we are Spanish, we are Italian, we are British. And this is what it means to be part of us. And you have to kind of subscribe to this to be part of the club. And if you don't, well, then you have a problem with us. And I think that is, in a way, what we need to find as a path that first, before we even ask these people who seem quite confused in their own identities to sign up to ours, we should at least find out anew what our actual identities are, because in the last 20 years or so, we seem to have lost sight of that, I feel.
Yeah, very much so. And you know what, to the detriment of our society. Everyone wants to, progression is fine, but progress in what direction? Progress, in my humble opinion, is only good when you're going forward. You could be making tons of progress, but going in the wrong direction. And what I see now, I tell you what, I'm not going to totally derail this, but man, I've been keeping track. I downloaded the two main Good Morning, or what was it, the Today Show, and now with that dude on MSNBC, what's her name? That guy, shit, I can never remember his name when I want to.
No,
It
can't
doesn't
help
matter.
you, I'm afraid. I'm not
Yeah.
good on American.
Matt out. Rachel Maddow. I'm really sorry too. It's so hard for me to, because I don't watch these people too often. I know they're popular, a lot of them, but they only come up sometimes. But I downloaded the two, interviews that Ms. Clinton has had thus far. Oh, Brett, what kind of progress what do we want to? Which direction do we want to go in? I mean, I think forget about Trump. Screw him. He's president, man. I mean, what's he care? But she's there. I mean, I'm watching her with Rachel Maddow. That was what I couldn't think of. And bashing Bernie Sanders, bashing the guy that while he was running against her, just, oh, look, I am derailing this too. We'll come up to this maybe another time. Because I really don't care the problem that I have is if you've got somebody that's deriding someone for doing something that they are doing as they speak, and that's what I've been witnessing with that. Oh, what the hell were we talking about? But I really am. I'm not sorry, but it's been on my mind, and it's like, man, holy crap. Let's get real, United States of America. It's time that we, like right now, Great Britain, they should be focused on one thing in my mind. That's Brexit. They should be focused on that because it's the last big thing that happened in your country that the people spoke on, no matter how close. Move on. And, right now in our country, we need to be focused on moving forward. Hillary Clinton, no. Trump, don't mention her. She's gone. Every time Trump says her name, she trolled him. I was counting. I think I'm up to like 9 times that Hillary Clinton has said InfoWars or Alex Jones, Britisher. That she said it.
And every single time she's giving him a free advertisement. Yes.
Oh, Lord, have mercy.
But yes,
I can't even.
In order to bring this back to the, what you were saying,
Please.
when it comes to national identities and things like that, and because national identities are very much wrapped up in values, aren't they? And when it comes to, Cameron and whatever, introducing certain tests and whatever for people who wanted to become British and whatever, you got the most ludicrous questions that were surrounding what one would refer to as British values, and they were, values of tolerance and democracy, and you just think, I'm sorry, but is there actually a nation in the world who wouldn't subscribe to that officially? In a way, what makes up nations is much more subtle. And it isn't just a matter of, oh, well, do you agree in democracy? Well, yes, everyone agrees in democracy as long as their side wins. That's one of the inherent problems. I mean, Iran is officially democratic, isn't it? And we saw where that got them. So in a way, it's made up of something that is sort of much more subtle. That you kind of need to understand some of the spirit, some of the mentality of a nation. That you need to understand some of its history. So I think that old test of people having to know the names of the American presidents was useful in that regard. Not so much that one just knew the names of some dead people of old, but hopefully that one would actually know who they were and the context in which that sat. Because it is important to kind of know what sort of struggles it took to get that nation to where it is now, so that you actually know what that nation is defending and what it is defending now. The idea that you are bringing up a generation of Americans who seem to be running around burning free speech signs is terrifying. I mean, there is no other way of putting it. I think, wasn't it Matt Christensen had something on just today on Twitter, I think, where he was advertising a clip of his. I've not been able to watch it yet, but the title of it seems to suggest that a majority of Democrats in California now want to see limits to free speech.
Yeah. No, I watched that and also looked at the laws there. They actually said it's gone too far. is the catchphrase that they used, that free speech has gone to Britisher. You called it. What did you tell me like 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago? Well, mate, we need that outpost right now. We need you to hold the line, and free speech is dead everywhere. But I'm not sure that we're going to, I'm not sure.
But yes, I mean, America is now pretty much the last outlier. You
Yeah,
are
well, if this
you're
passes,
the last country that is
passes,
actually prepared to basically stand up for free speech. And as long as you guys can kind of hold that line, then the rest of the Western world can at least be given a chance to realize the error of its ways and then get back to where you are.
Oh, man.
But if you crumble, all that will happen is that you will be fast forwarded along the path to where we are. And your Count Danculas will end up in court.
Oh, yeah.
And you will have people like in Germany, you know, having their websites taken down for Holocaust denial and things like that.
And that's the biggest thing for me, Britt, is that I'm so used to being able to say whatever I want to say on internet. See? And I don't even censor myself. I've said some horrible, horrible things I wouldn't want to have to go to court over and defend saying. I would just say, oh, I was pissed, and because of the situation that I was in, I thought I could say whatever I wanted because I was pissed, and they knew I wasn't going to come.
Why wouldn't you want to be? Why would you not want to defend them in court?
Well, because sometimes I have said things like, "You stupid son of a bitch! I'd like to cut your heart out and take a bite out of it while it was still bleeding."
The reason you don't want to defend it in court is because it is wrong. And that is why it is so easy to attack it and so hard to defend it. And therefore, it is very important that people understand that the principle of free speech cannot simply be weighed up every single time by whether we think that what a person has said is acceptable or not. Because if we measure it like that, then we head down the Count Dankula routine.
Well, no, and you were treating me like chattel today. I have the Twitters and DMs. You know?
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, I'm glad to repeat it in public. I believe I referred to you as a peon at some point.
Oh, you wouldn't even. I think you said something about it, chattel, and that I should lick your boots for all the work you've done for me, and how I wouldn't be a nothing, that I wouldn't even. No one would know who I was. I distinctly remember you
myself in that manner. I will have done it in a more classy style than that.
I distinctly remember you saying something very, very, very like this. You, sir, would be nothing if it wasn't for me. You owe all of your subs to me, maybe minus 15 or 20, and everything you've ever done online was off of my back.
Please watch in awe as the ogre is trying to create what one usually colloquially refers to as internet drama.
Well, and you know, in wrestling, like the fake wrestling, they call it heat.
We have to be careful with these things because some people might actually believe you. You are aware of that.
Oh yeah, yeah, I'm very aware. That's why I do that shit. I figure so. But the way I see it is that if anybody thinks that it's true, what they may do, Brett, is go back and like look at our catalog of live streams on the Ogre's channel, and now soon to be here also on Fridays, and they would be
nudge, wink, wink. Yes, but you're trying to draw attention to your channel here, are you?
Well, because I really want to do the 1,000 sub 24-hour stream before
you die.
Halloween.
Yes,
before Halloween would be preferable. Well, yeah, before I die would be.
You see, ladies and gentlemen, the cause of the ogre's frustration at the moment is that last time I looked, he was something like 16 subscribers away from 1,000.
Yeah.
So it's quite a milestone, and he's inching towards it. But you know, if you could all just do him a favor and go and subscribe to him in order to get him over the 1,000, that would make life for some of us a lot.
No, if I may, I would just say that before I really thought, because things were fluctuating and they went so slowly, and then so before I really thought things through, I mentioned something about a 24-hour stream. So forget about what were we talking about, Brett? In fact, I'm not sure that we're done on this bombing thing.
But yes, no, I can say, I can honestly confirm this,
That was,
just for all people listening, that the ogre has definitely set his heart on the fact that once he reaches 1,000, he will be doing a 24-hour stream. Yes, so there is no weaseling out of that, Mr. Ogre.
I don't
We
even
are
know how
all
I
looking
met you. I don't
forward
even
to you looking
know what
like death on camera doing your 24-hour stream.
I had a great life one day. I have no idea who you was. I just randomly saw a video on YouTube. I don't even know what it was. It was like an email. And how did I get wrapped up into this? Now I'm all the way. Now I'm hearing it, as they say, ankles deep.
Yes, there's no getting away from it now. But mind you, I think Mr. Razorfist gave you quite a good bump when it came to your subscribers after he was on your channel.
Yeah, well, there was nothing like Sargon. Sargon, one shot, man, on and off. And I believe I got 400 subs in 2 days, Brett.
Yes, he does have that capacity, doesn't he, to just basically send a sort of human avalanche towards people.
Avalanche. You did the This Week in Stupid, and I don't even want to say the number. I'll leave that up to you. But in just a very short period, we were both watching it. We were. You were at the cafe, and we were still talking on Twitter. It was like, wow, dude. Because every time I would sit here and pull your channel up and leave it up, and then wait like 10 minutes and hit refresh and be like, holy shit, another 500 people subbed. In that much time. It was that way for a little chunk. It was something else.
Yes, he has his uses. He let it officially be known that the ogre and the Britisher do think that Sargon of Akkad does have his uses.
Yeah. At least we're getting paid back on what we put in. I could say that. At least we're getting a little return on all the blood, sweat, and tears we put toward him. But we're getting something back.
So, given that we seem to have kind of, I think we've exhausted the Parsons Green underground blast that wasn't the blast.
And Brett, by the way, don't we not want to give too much credence, because I did prod you in that direction in a very devil's advocate way. But look, man, they still are a bunch of folks with their holy weapons in their underpants. We need to face what they are. We need not to accept Islamophobia and all this insanity. And we need to work with the Muslim leaders that we have in our respective countries. And we need to renounce the ones that, get up and give sermons about kill the devils and whatnot. And other than that, I mean, what can we say? This plot did very much, Britt, show what they are. A bunch of grab-astic high school boys that don't know how to treat women, don't know how to, they don't know how to meld and blend into society. And they really, in the end, it doesn't seem like it can really get much done. So, yeah, you're right. We do need to move on, but I had to say that much.
In that respect, I think Donald Trump, God bless his little heart, once in a while does get something right. And when he tends to refer to them as losers, I think that is actually quite a good way of going about it. But basically not grant them the credence of being seen as dangerous ninja warriors, of whom we all have to be careful because they move stealthily about the place and could be a danger to us all. But instead to just basically look at them as kind of antisocial, ne'er-do-wells who basically can not function properly in life and therefore are desperately looking for some sort of meaning. And they come to the conclusion that blowing themselves up, or at least blowing other people up, might give them some sort of meaning in life.
Did you notice this, Bert?
Which is a fairly pathetic, position to hold, if you think of it.
Very pathetic. I'm not sure if I got this from the BBC.
Yeah.
So
this is this is the next story we had. The ogre has been so kind as usual to come up with a little show map for us. So we've got certain stories that we know we want to touch upon. So
I thought this was something. I really did. I thought this was something a little bit more above some extremist fundamentalist morons. I really did think this was a little higher than that on the list.
Well, yes, these guys actually know how to build missiles and nuclear bombs, so that they are on a somewhat different level from people who can't really build bombs that explode properly. But yes, North Korea once again has decided to fire a missile over Japan, which is, of course, a blatant provocation. And one can but wonder what goes through Kim Jong-un's mind whenever he decides once again to kind of poke the bear with a stick. Because, I mean, surely the entire idea of having nuclear weapons is effectively for it to be a situation in which there can only be losers in case there is a war. I mean, it is stalemate. The moment that both sides have nuclear weapons, you have a stalemate. Now, the position between North Korea and the US is now officially a stalemate. Both sides can wipe each other out, but neither of them can really use their weapon. Now, the moment that you have that situation, what is the point of provoking the other side any further?
Oh.
And I think that is where everybody is a little bit worried, as in, what are they actually trying to achieve? Do they know themselves what they are trying to achieve?
Brett, I vehemently disagree with you in this one point. They do not have the capability to wipe us out. However, we do have enough missiles in Kansas alone to not only wipe out North Korea, but the Korean Peninsula, Japan, everything around there, everything in that general vicinity could be turned into nothingness, because I do believe the United States possesses the ability to destroy the earth.
Oh yes, yes.
Only one other person, and that is Russia.
Vladimir Putin. Yes. No, what I mean when I say annihilate each other, I'm actually talking of the Korean Peninsula. That basically the Koreans have got the capacity of blowing up all the Americans and all the South Korean forces on the Korean Peninsula. So too have the Americans got the capacity to wipe out the North Koreans.
I want to agree with Britisher. You'll disagree with this to your bloody grave unless it happens, as it's happened on oil rigs and all over the world. I know that 150 men could render that entire regime null and void. No doubt about it. If they strategically dropped, they call them halos, high altitude, low opening, drop these men out of such high altitudes that they can't even see the plane on radar. And by the time they see anything, it's a human being falling down. It's like finding a bird and seeing there's a bird, and that's it. And could it be done? Absolutely. We know too much about Kim Jong-un. We know too much about his support staff. Look, I'm not going to drone on too long about this, Britt, but here's the facts. I'm saying this, every time I say we, I'm saying the United States. Oh, don't get me wrong, Britisher. The British Marines could send 90 men. I'm telling you, 120 tops, 90 men, and the British Special Forces could be strategically, and they got the same capabilities we do. They do the same practices we do. They could high altitude, low opening jump into North Korea. They could take over your people, Brett. It could take that country over.
I am very
in an hour and a half. In an hour and a half.
I am very doubtful about that.
In an hour and a half. In 5 days after that hour and a half, they could solidify that overthrow. It would, I mean, in other words, it would be instant that they send the men over there and just take out Kim Jong-un by strategically dropping very good forces into that area, fighting people that don't even want to fight for the sumbitch they're supposed to be protecting. And then it would be no more than 5 days after that that the actual hardware would be there to solidify said takeover. And they're up. Quiet down, Britt. But you Britisher, you got me stuttering. You know that's true. You know that, and I'm not trying to appeal to any patriotic side of you. I don't think it exists. I'm trying to appeal to your logical side, saying, Britisher, do you not believe that the Queen's Army has special forces that far exceed That's it.
Oh, I mean, the SAS is world famous in that regard, but I just don't see them having the capacity to drop in on any nation and just take out their government.
SAS, isn't their motto strike first, right? Isn't that their motto?
No, I think he who dares wins is
Okay, I'm sorry.
SAS's motto.
There you go. That's just as good though, right? He who dares wins. And I'll tell you, they would all be on board with being just like I said. Look, I'm feeling my nerves prickled because no, Brett, they're not on the same playing field with us right now. They're not on the same playing field with you. And your country doesn't have the nuclear stockpile that Russia or the United States has. They're not on the same playing field because you, sir, you Britisher, if it came down to it, would take whatever weapon was handed you. If it came down to you were the last man and it was your island, you know, oh man.
Oh dear God, I pity the place if they would have to rely on me.
Well, I do too. And if they had to rely on me, Brett, but like you, when it came time for that and somebody handed me a weapon and was like, at Portus, you know, I don't know. I mean, I would do what I had to do.
Hannibal ad portas. My God, we're going Latin now, ladies and gentlemen. We're going.
I knew I had to shoehorn.
Highbrow.
I had to shoehorn. Let me get my here. I got it right here. See, it says it right here. And in fact, you were the one that drew this up. So it says in here in section 8, it says that once a stream, the ogre is to segue into ancient Rome as So there we go. So I was segueing. I was just fulfilling my obligations.
Yeah, of course, with a comic book, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, just for those people who are just confused, you know, Hannibal ad portas means Hannibal is at the gates. So yes, we're just showing off. I'm sorry. We apologize from the heart. But no, I really don't think that when it comes to North Korea, it would just be as simple as sending some people to take him out. I really think that he would be a very, very well protected person. Anybody going in there, it would be a complete suicide mission. Because otherwise you could take out any government you didn't like. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, I'm just not. I'll talk to you later. Listen, hang on. Common sense guy, you think that I'm just going to sit here all night and banter with the Brit while you just look, man, common sense guy, quit sending my bloody link out, Nate, or I'll stop it. That's it. I mean it, Britisher. This guy's busted my balls so hard. I'm 4 people away from the thing that I don't want to think about right now. Look, here's the deal. If I go to 1,000 on this stream, I'm not stopping what I'm doing and doing a fucking 24-hour stream. Look, you made me say the F word. I'm not stopping what I'm doing and doing a bloody 24-hour stream. I will plan it for within 7 days of reaching 1,000 subs because I don't know when I'm going to reach 1,000 subs and then lose 10 the next day. You know how it's been with us, Brett. You've been on the same train. Look, I'm over it. Common sense guy,
gentlemen,
bloody quit it. Stop it, you bastard.
Just so you know why these beads of sweat are appearing on the ogre's forehead, it is because
I'm not trying to
has now reached 996 subscribers. We are only 4 subscribers away from him being obliged by means of his own word to host a 24-hour stream. So if we could just find 4 more souls to join, then we would have the ogre at a considerable disadvantage.
Yeah, well, I feel like this is personally motivated because you also know that I'll do the super chat when we do this. So do you have some personal motivation, Britisher, and prodding this? Look, I don't want to talk about it. Let's go on because I don't even know, man. Look, we just did this, and I'm not sure if it's common sense guy, but yeah, I look back at my channel. And I'm not, you know, there was a sudden spike in subs, shall we say, Brit. Probably a whole boatload of British folks just chortling and drinking, you know, single malt scotch right now.
Yes, they put aside their cup of tea, their Jacob's crackers, and their slices of Wensleydale cheese and just decided to subscribe to the Ogre's channel just for a laugh. Yes.
All right, let's carry on. I'm not letting this derail the whole daggone thing if I can help it. And it's great of you. I will say this. because there's got to be some people listening right now that were part of this avalanche. Yeah, I spoke too soon when I said I would do a 24-hour stream. Yes, I am going to do it. I actually had a dream about it not too long ago, and it wasn't pleasant. And also, it means a lot to me. For everyone that subbed, I'm working on a video right now. I'm even more lax than the Britisher is, and by that I mean I don't even have a schedule. I mean, my mate, he does one every week. You can find the week that was. But I just looked, and I think my last video was put up 2 weeks ago. So I have one down. I have some stuff down, and I'm working on it, and I'll get them up. But thanks to everybody that subbed. I hope the main reason that you did sub to me before I start crying like a girl is that, you know, we do the church Mondays and Wednesdays. And you can find the Britisher, for those of you that are here today for only the Britisher and couldn't care less about me, whether I live or die. That's fine with me. He'll be there, you know, Mondays and Wednesdays. So will the common sense guy who is doing this shit to me right now. Oh, well, anyway, Brett, I don't know. North Korea, it's just like, to me, when I was typing in, what do you think I was thinking today as I'm putting the show map in and I'm putting something in about North Korea? What do you think was going through my head, honestly?
You'll have to help me here. No, I don't know.
You don't remember having a certain guest on and that topic came up?
Help me out here.
Well, we had Sargon on, and I kept asking him about North Korea. That's like twice about North Korea. Yeah, I think that's all I had to do was say Sargon in conjunction with North Korea. Yeah, that is the joke is back in hand.
Yes, there was a conversation going on between Sargon and myself that was quite in depth about
Syria, right?
War. Yes, it was about the Syrian civil war, and then there was somewhat a jarring segue trying to steer us towards North Korea, which kind of halted everything for a moment.
A jarring segue after an hour and 15 minutes of that. So
well, you do know that you are speaking to the ultimate nerd here. I mean, I was the person who did 4 3/4 hours with the academic agent on Tory contenders for the leadership.
The top tropes, yeah. I was there for bloody 4 hours of it, man. It was unreal. It was good.
And a quarter with Sargon on the Syrian civil war. That was nothing, as I think I've proven by now. Yes, I can bore for my country, but
well, no, I wouldn't say that. You can bore as in you're boorish. You're like a boar, you know, a wild boar with your tusks flying and flaring. All non-comers get out of the way, terrified of the Britisher in his second to none logic and deep thinking. Yeah,
no, this must be some other British you're talking about.
No, I'm talking about you. Now, you know, somebody actually said today, I don't believe it was in this side chat, but I heard someone use the word admire, and they were talking about you, Brett. They were saying in fact, no, I know. All I got to do is click right here on this bell, and I'll see a chat that I was just in. Yeah, someone just said someone. From someone I admire like the Brit. Now, I don't think they were agreeing with you. I'm not even going to open that up right now, but I did see today in conjunction with your name, the word admire. It's kind of cool, right?
Well, you know, you're trying your best to make me blush, aren't you?
Oh, no, let's move on. In fact, we're killing it, Britt. We're like 45 minutes and we're done with the whole daggone show. We've just been sitting here, no breaks. I've not had a break.
So basically, I think it might be a good opportunity to move this on, because you did find for us some story from Italy, which kind of took me aback when I read a bit of it, because it seems to basically predict the end of the world, which of course is always a good subject. So it seems that Don Antonio Mattatelli, which is, I mean, can you actually get more Italian than that? Anybody who begins his name with Don definitely is made for Hollywood. But yes, he is an exorcist, apparently, and he has announced that the apocalypse is imminent due to some of the things that have been occurring, particularly these natural disasters, you know, hurricanes and earthquakes and such like. So do you want to fill in any gaps here, Mr. Ogre?
Yeah. 1009. all kinds of mocking posts from the common sense guy. I thought he was my mate, Britt. I thought that we were mates, and that you know, I felt like partially responsible for getting him to be part of the crew. And here he is, man, right here, right in front of my face as I'm trying to focus on this story, just laughing at me while I'm down, just laughing in my face. But yeah, I noticed. It's not just that I noticed this story. It made me think of, and I'll do it, man, 24 hours, man, I will do it. But it made me think of the whole thing with, and I'm going to bring it here right off the bat. Not even going to wait. I consider when Jerry Falwell and all these nutcases, they were like hurricanes would come up. They'd be like, oh, a hurricane did this in New Orleans because there's gay people, and this tornado is because there was homosexuals or heathens, whatever kind of centers, and all of this nonsense. And now we have the other side that was like, oh, if you believe in God, that God would do this, you're a moron. Now we have this other side, same thing. The hurricane that went up into Houston was there because of Trump voters in Texas. Never mind that Houston bleeds bluer than a long time, what do you call it? The blue bloods in where you come from. I was trying to be slick, but I can't think of nothing cool to put in there with blue bloods. They bleed blue. They're definitely not Republican in Houston. And then so you have Jennifer Lawrence saying all this stuff. Look, you can't listen. Kim Jong, I'm just going to say, I want to do this way, Brett, because I think this will get you to open up a bit and give me a second to go take care of nature and just at least stand up. We've been busting it too, folks. It's something. If you've never done anything like the British and I are doing right now, go try it sometimes. It's kind of fun. It's good for the soul. So let me say this. This is a tough one, Britisher, because it's religious. You see what I mean? It's how should we feel about people saying that natural disasters, leaders of any kind, from Charlemagne all the way up to Napoleon and Hitler and whoever else, how are we supposed to look at folks that would equate that with some kind of God? There is a God somewhere in the universe who has his eye on you, Britisher. And if you don't do what's right, if you don't listen to mother's proddings from the cradle, if you shame your family, they will bring woe on you. You will, I don't know. I'm done. I mean, and that's what I see with this. It's, oh, my Lord. So there you go, Brett. Do we need to exorcise the devil that is the tropical storms heading our ways?
Well, I would look at it. I would look at it in this way. When it comes to Don Mattatelli, I still can't get over that word. I mean, he, with a name like that, he should be a Formula One racing driver, shouldn't he? But
For sure.
With things like that, I think it shows how we can fall prey to the temptation to see patterns in things. I think because our minds are the way they are, we seem to be kind of, we seem to be designed to be problem solvers. So we automatically look for patterns in things that occur around us. I mean, wasn't there even that that film, The Beautiful Mind, where what is it? Russell Crowe played that scientist who, in real life, did actually he was a brilliant mathematician, but at the same time, he also suffered from severe psychological problems because his mind was just so driven to seek to find patterns within the world around him, and he could simply just not stop. He couldn't turn it off, to the
John
point
Nash
it was completely manic. And I think what we are seeing here in Don Mattatelli is that temptation to see patterns. And I think that is something that we've seen throughout human history, within aspects of religiosity, that one tries to see certain omens as, you know, signs from the gods that oh, this occurred last time, just before a volcano erupted, so this time round it's occurred again. The gods are trying to tell us something. And at the same time now, in just that way that you alluded to there, we have now also got the what could one refer to them as? You know, the kind of people who form the community to whom science is their new religion. And they are applying it in exactly the same way. They are basically seeing patterns in things that are completely unscientific, because they themselves are not scientists. They simply just subscribe to science as some sort of religion, but it is always science which is executed by somebody else. But they themselves will then see, oh, well, it's been raining a lot this week. That must be global warming. And we get a lot of that these days. And we get a lot of it in the media too, by people who, how shall we say, apply science unscientifically in this manner, by simply trying to find patterns everywhere they look. But it is kind of driven by confirmation bias, both in the religious way, but so too in this, you know, pseudo-scientific way. One sees what one wants to see, what one believes is there everywhere. And in a way, you can find that in all aspects of life. We had over here, what was she called? Mary Whitehouse, who was kind of the Puritan in chief. She was the one in the 1980s who was very heavily advocating for censorship. And she had a profound effect on the media here in Britain, you know. And you know, one hopes that there is a demon set aside for her in hell for the level of effect she had.
One hopes.
But she too saw filth, as she always liked to refer to it as, you know, immorality. She saw it everywhere, to the point where in the end she was seeing it in children's programs. There were children's programs like Andy Pandy or The Magic Roundabout, in which she was convinced that there were subliminal messages trying to corrupt children, simply because you are geared up to try and find patterns everywhere. And the moment you fall into that trap, it's almost as if you can't escape it anymore. So I think I think our Don, whose name now escapes me, he pretty much has fallen into that. He now basically, in every single natural disaster, in everything that is unfortunate which occurs, he immediately sees the hand of God leading to the end of time. And in the same way, others are seeing every hurricane, every bit of bad weather, every natural disaster that is in any way weather related, immediately as a sign of this is global warming. Even though, you know, there is clearly no scientific proof whatsoever that one particular occurrence could do that. I mean, during hurricane season in the Caribbean, you get hurricanes. It is now the hurricane season. You can say that Irma was the fiercest hurricane in 100 years. That is true. So you can immediately say, well, in that case, things must be getting worse. Well, no, because 100 years ago, we seem to have had a hurricane of that scale. Thus, if this one must be global warming, what was the last one 100 years ago? So there are these easy temptations to draw these conclusions, which are completely false. And therefore, we should be resisting these temptations. One of the problems, of course, in this case is that not only is the temptation there, but you have got the media who are very much driven towards trying to constantly champion this cause, which is why it then comes blaring out of you from every single television set and every single radio. But most would basically question whether you can in any way ever relate a particular weather event to something that is supposed to be an underlying trend within the climate.
Well, but here's the problem. Okay, here's the number one problem that I was hoping you would get to, and maybe everybody's overlooking. But if God would protect you from a tornado because you asked him to, this is coming from the standpoint of someone that believes there's something up there. Then what about when the tornado hits a house? So we're all those people. So we have to realize that you can't have it both ways. If you're someone that believes in religion, believes in God, a Judeo-Christian God, then you would say, no, he doesn't get involved in things like that. Or you're forced to say, well, then, and this is the way it's put in the Bible for anybody that cares. It says God brings rain on the just and the unjust alike. That's what it says. And that is the be-all and end-all description of it.
Well, I think, you know, if you kind of slip your hat on, which is understanding of religion, then you would have to sort of say that no matter how religious you are, you always have to you always have to comprehend that you do not understand God, and you could not possibly do so, because how would you, who is less than an ant compared to that being,
thank you,
comprehend what would motivate or drive somebody who has got a plan that involves billions of years, and he is also most of the time more than likely occupied with keeping, you know, black holes from crashing into each other and so on. So if one were to be religious, one simply has to understand that, you know, one cannot comprehend his ways, and therefore to try to, especially spitefully, kind of try to credit certain events with being proof that your opinion is right and that it is God's just punishment.
Oh, that's folly.
Some other people.
That's just folly.
Yes, that is just foolhardiness. Yes.
Well, because then you got to say the next bloody battle you lose that God didn't want you to win it, right?
Yes.
I mean, and again, as a Christian, Brett, I will say that in the Christian record, there are examples when, you know, the walls of Jericho came crashing down. And I mean, I could go on. I don't want to even get into in depth, because then everyone will just say, oh, discount the red bearded guy with the funny hat. When, hey, even though you are what we would consider to be agnostic, Britisher, we both hold our own little crotchets of Catholicism, whether we like it or not. We know we do. We all do. It doesn't matter what those are. They may be, I'm not going to go into what they may be. I do not have enough time on this Friday church. You know what, Brett? This is fear-mongering. That's all it is. It's fear-mongering. It's people saying, if you don't do as we do, why? The great, disconnected, ambiguous God of the universe, and everything you don't understand will bring your house to ruin, will cause your daughters to be raped, your sons to be unemployed, and your life to be over. You know, and to me, that, you know, I hear this stuff. It's like, good gracious, man.
I do believe the ogre just deployed his radio advertising voice there for a second or two.
Yeah, I'm not even going to charge you, mate. It's payback for all you've done for me. Well, no, I was looking. I could see over here. I'll screen share it, man. Yeah, you know, common sense guy out there. And it's not that I don't want the subs, Brett. Don't get me wrong. It's he knows what he just did. So now I'm at a number I didn't think I would be at. I thought probably 7-8 months ago when I started this that I would be at this number in about 2 years. That was my outlook.
I just love the perfect irony of it, that earlier you were saying that you wouldn't do it when you were at 1,000 because you can never know due to the variation. You could lose another 10.
Yeah.
Yes, and now you're at 1,010. So.
Funny, you notice, Brett, we think alike, because I was going to mention that but I'm still going to let this marinate. And if this is what it is next Friday, if it is what it is next Friday, why? Probably Saturday, sometime early in the morning, which will be a little bit late afternoon for the common sense guy. He'll start his first 12 hours, and we're going to do, and by the way, I'm going to say it now where everybody's listening. I'm going to do a 12-hour stream, but I am not going to be on the stream.
No,
12
a
hours,
24-hour stream, is it not?
Well, there's 8 hour sections, and I can do, so I'll do 3 of those, but I will do probably 4 and then hand it off for 4 and then come back for 4 and then hand it off for 4 and then come back for 2, hand it off for 4 and come back for the last 2. That's kind of what I've got lined up right now. And if you haven't noticed, Britisher, I haven't asked you to get involved in this debauchery, but if you want to, you're more than welcome to come and host a couple hours on my now very famous and obviously super popular over 1,000 fucking channel.
Ladies and gentlemen, have you actually ever heard so much whining over someone whose channel actually seems to be doing well today?
I pulled my penis out to stop my channel from going over 1,000 subs. And now it appears that there's nothing I can do to stop it, Britisher, because I'm not going to do that again on your channel.
Yes, it's inevitable. You're now just over 1,000, so you'll just have to live with it.
No, and it's good. I mean, it is good. We'll talk about why it's good. It does seem bad. So I really want to stop now. It doesn't matter to one way or the other. Don't base your life on that kind of thing, folks. That's for sure. Just don't base it on that. Because if we did, I would have to say, well, now watch the chat. Now it would be like, he is. What I have to say, oh, the Britisher's got, 14,000 subs. He's just so great. And I just broke 1,000. So what he must be, he's 14 times better than me. And then of course we would have to look at Boogie. And we have to say 4.5 million. So he is so much better than us, Brett, that we don't even, it's just the shine is prime. We can't even be in the same room as he is. So I don't know. It's all weird. It's weird for me. I can't imagine for you, Brett, to be honest, from what I know about you that I won't share with everybody. The idea of being famous, how in the fuck are you trying to handle that shit, mate?
Well, one just drinks cocoa and leans back and thinks of England. That's the way one handles it. But
Yeah.
in order to sort of try and take this on, I've got a link here that might be of interest to you if you want to screen share that. Because it's referring to Count Dankula, who was, he's basically been in the Daily Mail. And this shows us, how shall I put it, the other side of the Daily Mail. That I think you referred to a newspaper earlier in this stream in which you said, I know it's such and such a newspaper, but they wouldn't just make things up. So once in a while, yes, the Daily Mail is quite useful for headlines. I use them to harvest headlines when it comes to the week that was and things. But on the other hand side, the Daily Mail can also be an absolutely ruthless tabloid who just make things up as they go along. And it was just interesting how they ended up with the headline, "Girlfriend Tells Partner's Hate Crime Trial." If you just stick on so I can read it.
Oh, sorry, Brett. Sorry.
Girlfriend tells partner's hate crime trial, he turned her cute pug Buddha into a Nazi monster by training it to salute videos of Hitler.
Oh,
now, if you were to read that headline and that headline alone, what sort of impression would you get of both Count Dankula and of his girlfriend and what she thinks of him and his having trained the dog?
Now, and this is them together, right, Brett?
Yes.
This is the problem I have. I think they took her words wildly out of context.
Oh, they did. Because if you read the article afterwards, you can see how she basically was saying, well, yes, he basically taught the dog how to do the Nazi salute, and she refers to the Nazis as monsters and whatever. And then they just basically wildly twist this into a headline that looks a little more sensational than perhaps it should be. So much so that Count Dankula actually tweeted out to them and said, well, yeah, it's a wonderfully misleading headline you've got out there. But I think all of us will not be able to help but snigger at seeing Count Dankula in a suit giving his James Bond impression here. But you must take your hat off to the man. That
Look at his hair, man.
when you look at his smile, I mean, here is somebody who is going to prison for what can only be, not to prison, he's going to court on a charge that can only be regarded as complete nonsense, which could send him to prison. And yet he's still going in there with a smile on his face. And you just do have to say that, yes, he definitely has a spine made of iron, doesn't he?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, well, they haven't wiped that smile off his face. That's the same. Actually, his mouth was open, and but his eyes, when you look at his eyes there, Brett, that's the part of you that smiles more than your mouth. Wouldn't you say, mate?
Oh, yes, yes, very much so. But it kind of, he still has got that mischievous attitude, even when he's going into court. That here is just somebody whom they are unable to break.
You can see the low life tied his tie all like, what do you call that, a half Windsor? I do the double, but he dyed it all. But I will say this: you can see it's not a clip on. I guess I got to give him that. I'm thinking that he just bought this suit at a secondhand store yesterday.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Fashion Advice with the Ogre and the Britisher.
Well, look at it though, Brett. I'm not even kidding. I wouldn't get with you because I don't think you and I'm more of a metrosexual. Even though I look like I do right now, which I'll show the crew again, everybody here. I have on what I have on today, which doesn't happen to be on anything nice. But if I see a guy with an Oxford collar, you know, the buttons right here on the collar, and he's got a tie on with a jacket, I automatically think, what a moron. I mean, you have an Oxford so you don't have a suit jacket. That's for hot weather, you know. You get the Oxford anyway. But I would have to say, looking at Count Dankula right now as I am.
Well, you see, I wasn't really drawing attention to his tie knot or anything else. I just thought that it was remarkable in how good a cheer he was as he entered the court. And of course, it is worth pointing out, because I don't think we've actually mentioned this yet, that Count Dankula is to be back in court in November. So it is still not over. Now, he's told me a little bit more about it, but not knowing what I can share about that and what not, I won't really go into any more as to what one believes might be happening in November. But yes, he is going to go back in November. The trial is still not at an end.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say he actually tweeted. I don't think that everything he tells friends is because he's pretty secretive about what's going on.
Well, as I say, we have to be careful because we don't want to kind of, damage his odds. But so basically, he's now been in court in 2 separate weeks, so on a separate day. In either case, it lasted hours. And then it was adjourned once again for another date in November. And you just think, I'm sorry, people, but how long is this going to take? What on earth is going through these people's minds? Why could this possibly take so long? Because this is a 2-minute and 23-second video. I mean, how many witnesses do you possibly need to call? How much expertise do you need on this? So yes, it still seems, that they've still got some substantive way to go on this, and you just wonder, what an utter waste of public money. Because, I mean, I'm quite sure that the courts and the police would have better and more fruitful things to do than this. And as somebody who lives in Britain. I mean, I'm not in Scotland, I'm in England, but nonetheless, one can sort of say, our collective taxes kind of pay for this sort of nonsense. You can't help but despair at seeing how this stuff is just completely wasted.
Well, you can't help.
Well, it just seems to be utter madness. I mean, how many hours do you want to go through something like this? And I mean, it would just be the perfect storm if in the end it ends up with him being found guilty. I mean, I daren't even imagine the situation, but it would take the utter waste of talent and money to, you know, hitherto unimagined levels. And this, of course, comes in a week in which we just had a prisoner released here in Britain. This, I believe, was in England, who he went originally to prison. You'll forgive me this tangent. It will make sense once I get there, ladies and gentlemen.
Crack on.
He went to prison for a year for assault on his father. But then while he was in prison, because it can obviously be a fairly challenging affair, he developed some sort of psychological problems, mainly depression. He started harming himself and things like that. At one point, he set fire to his mattress. Now, for this, he received a sentence of another additional 10 months. But it was something called an IPP. Now, I forget what that acronym exactly stands for, but it's something that they've already given up on again because they realized that it wasn't a particularly wise thing to do. And that means that the person is held in prison until the probation service can be convinced of his not being a danger to society and then let him out. Now, the reason it showed that it wasn't particularly wise is, as usual, government introduced this particular measure and then told everybody, oh, this is going to be applied with a lot of common sense. So this is only going to be used in the most extreme cases. This is the sort of rhetoric that government over here uses time and time again. So whereas everybody was assured that this would only be used in the most extreme cases, so perhaps, you know, in 1 or 2 dozen cases in a decade or something like that, there are, even now that this thing has been abandoned several years ago, there are now still over 1,000 people being held in prison on that particular measure. The reason this particular gentleman hit the headlines was because he is now, since he has been found guilty because of his mattress burning and told he had to stay there an extra 10 months, he has been in 11 years. So it gives you, you know, the government's calculations of what each prison place costs per annum. And there are other calculations that actually show a considerably higher figure. But the government's calculations are £35,000 per year per prison place. So by keeping this man in prison, we've just blown away £385,000. And nobody can quite understand how this even could occur. Because the reason he was eventually let out was because one eventually conceded that he wasn't a danger to anybody else. He was merely a danger to himself due to his being very depressed and having certain personality disorders. So we just blew that money away for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Now, if you multiply that a few thousand times, you get to why people could perhaps be annoyed at this sort of thing happening. And it sort of shows how we have a problem with our entire justice system in this country. That we have politicians who are oh so keen always to appear severe in order to give the impression that they are dealing with crime. But in so many cases, they eventually just end up introducing completely futile measures that ruin some individuals' lives completely. And don't get me wrong, this man was justly in prison. And nobody really contests that. He went to prison for a year for assault. Yes, he then had a problem in prison and he ended up burning a mattress, for which his term was extended. Again, one may want to question whether 10 months wasn't a bit little extreme for that, but it ended up not to be 10 months. It turned out to be 11 years on top of that. And it shows that the system doesn't really seem to have any measure of control. There doesn't seem to be anyone from the outside looking in to actually check, are all the people that we've actually got in there still meant to be in there? Because otherwise you would have thought after 5 or 6 years, it would have occurred to someone that perhaps this chap shouldn't be in there anymore. But it just continues grinding on and grinding on and grinding on. And in that respect, the justice system is a law unto itself in this country. And it really urgently requires politicians to do something about it, to pull their finger out, so to speak, and actually get on with reforming this issue. But instead, they are constantly getting trapped in absolute nonsense and individual little hobby horses of their own. And therefore, we end up with, debates in the Houses of Parliament about how to increase the number of women in boardrooms in the City of London. And you think, well, hang on a moment, there are people sitting in prison at huge cost to the public purse who shouldn't even be in there. And yet the best thing we can talk about is that we should have more women directors. I really think we can do
For
better
what,
than this.
though? Oh, yeah, more women directors if they fill a spot, though. And I'm listening to Britt. I'm listening. I just want to know if you're I don't know how you are, but sometimes I feel like I'm running out of air. You sound like you could go on forever, though.
Well, I mean, I think I've just had my little rant. I shall now calm down and have another sip of cocoa.
No, it was wonderful, man. Because I think if this is, because it's what you said, this is not a real crime. They are, they're pissing away time, money, ink for newspapers, all of these things. I mean, we've heard from Dankula from himself, Britisher. You and I have heard from him. I know this is one of the reasons why it stuck so hard in your craw. That now that where he's at, he's got Joe, the mechanic down the street, talking. Everybody's talking trash about this vile, horrible thought criminal. And I mean, we're sitting here thinking, bloody hell. Why, if he was a bouncer in my town, I wouldn't have a problem. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with him. And it does seem like a tremendous waste of all of these resources. Not only,
well,
even though I think it's paramount, I do think that the waste of time in the court and with the public's money is paramount.
Well,
But that's not it.
The reason this has taken so long is because they're struggling to find time in court in order to deal with his case. And you sort of feel, well, I'm sorry, but if these are the sort of cases with which you are cluttering up the courts,
you throw it out.
Is it a wonder that you are struggling for time in order to hold your court trials?
Right.
So if you would actually get rid of this piffle, if you would no longer be dealing with such nonsense in the courts, then maybe you would have more time with which to actually deal with real cases. And you wouldn't then have to wait for months on end for them to come to court. But as long as you clutter up the entire system with nonsense like this, then yes, I'm sorry, it is something that, yes, does indeed stick in my craw, because I feel that we have in this country been pursuing people for things in court that at times in other countries would just seem utterly laughable. And I really hope that at some point we grow out of it. And particularly now that Britain is embarking on Brexit and will basically have to begin to stand entirely on its own 2 feet. I think the point is coming whereby we will have to be more efficient and more grown up in the way we run our own nation. And we will therefore no longer be able to just for want of a different expression, ladies and gentlemen, piss away money. Because that's exactly what we're doing in this case. The Count
Well, it
Dankula
doesn't
case
feel good to do that.
not be in court, and it's as simple as that.
And it doesn't feel good to piss away that money, you know, because a lot of people say, well, British, you know, you're not, it's not like they're reaching into your wallet and taking out, you know, 10 pounds. But yes, it is. Yes. Yes. Because every time they tax you and some of that money goes here, that is money out of your wallet that you may have preferred to go to, you know, helping the pensioners or help, you know, whatever it may be, building some new roads or whatever it may be that you would rather to see it go to.
Every time we hear in the news that there isn't enough money for the NHS, and once again now in this coming winter, the NHS is basically saying that the pips are beginning to squeak. They simply don't have enough funds in order to operate properly. Every time we hear things like that, then ask yourself, if we wouldn't have been keeping that man in prison for 11 years, how many hip operations would that have paid for? If we could just look at the salary of the judge alone in the hours in which Count Dankula is to be in court.
Oh Lord.
What could we pay for with that? And
quite a lot.
It's things like that where you just have to sort of start asking yourself, I'm sorry, but as you know, everywhere in the world, the mature democracies are struggling to find money to actually run their statehood, so to speak. As this is happening everywhere, we really need to start asking ourselves what our priorities are. And I really think that, particularly in this country, we need to have a clear out of law. Basically, what do we actually think is worth locking people up for and what is not? And irrespective of how well-meaning the law was, which we introduced some 20 years ago or whatever, if we really don't see any great benefit to society for locking somebody up for it, then it should be gone, plain and simple. Because it cannot continue in this way. I mean, when you hear some of the nonsense for which we are locking people up, and some of the idiocy in the system, as I say, I mean, a man who's been in prison for a decade and seemed to have just got lost between the cracks, even though it just didn't seem to serve any purpose for his being there. That is when you just cannot help but sort of wonder, how much longer can this go on? And I think once we leave the European Union and we don't have the European Parliament taking a lot of the weight of producing regulation and law, and we rely entirely on the British Parliament, I think that is the moment when I think we really, as a people, should be entitled to demand from our Parliament to grow up. Yeah. That now we really have to rely on you, so now you have to be adults. So the next time when some parliamentarian stands up and wishes to express her feminist view of this or that particular foreign policy matter, perhaps it should be incumbent on the Speaker of the House to stand up and tell her to sit down. Because
that'd be nice for once.
At some point, we really need to return back to grown-up politics. And with Brexit coming along, I think that should be the point in which we effectively put our politicians on notice that things now really truly do have to improve. We will never expect our politicians to be completely sensible, because frankly, you know, which politicians on earth are.
Well, no one is.
The level of nonsense that seems to have been produced in Britain over the last 20 years
could be lower.
So painful that I think it now, you know, that Brexit would be a good point in which to demand things to change.
Yeah, it could be lower. And now, before I try to drag you into at least another half hour or so, I just want to say something real quick, Britisher. We surely do want to thank Sardonic 7 and RPR for doing their diligence out here We've also I must say, stories. We thank you so much for being moderators out here so far tonight. It's been absolutely no need for it. But also, just very quickly, we thank you so much for joining us. Me Too, Sunshine, Goatman, Robert Delike, K Thornazzi, pretty creative there, big guy. I hope you're if you're alt-right, we would surely like to speak to you, because we haven't heard anybody from that side that has half a brain. You know, Noah Pearson, it goes on, both Alyssum. If I've missed you, and I'm sure I've missed a lot, you know, we just want to thank everybody for being here. If we're not mentioning every idea that you put forth, in fact, if you've noticed a very real disconnect from the Britisher and I in the chat, it's not unintentional. It's intentional. Because if we looked at everything that you all said and then went off onto, well, why we would never talk about anything perfectly coherent, and if I started mentioning individual people and what they said, why it makes other people feel like whatever it is. So that's the whole there and this and that from the what you call it, Brett. That was my try at a shout out. What did it suck, Brett? That was my shout out.
Oh, no, I think you are doing a lot better at that than I am, because you are a much older hand at doing live streams now than I am. And when it comes to live streams and observing the chat, I am next to useless. I cannot. I think you have that wonderful expression, don't you? To walk and chew gum at the same time. And that is one of those abilities that I do not seem to have. I think it's one of those things that comes with practice. So,
well, if you ever get a job at a church and you have to be at a board meeting, church board meeting, and you know, you have the, you know, you get a quorum call and everybody's there, there's enough people there, and then you say, okay, and today, okay, here's the agenda, and you realize the agenda is a budget, church budget, and then changing the drapes and the carpet in the primary, which would be a small school, the little thing for church and where the kids were, change the carpet in the primary school area. Oh, you know, I've gotten very good at being prepared to listen to someone and really hear them, Britisher, really hear them. Because I'm definitely not trying to equate you with some 95-year-old woman and her opinion on what color the drapes should be. But I'm saying that I'm so used to hearing that 95-year-old woman telling everyone what her opinion would be on those drapes while I think about the important thing, which in what I just rattled off would be church budget. You know, that's like the only thing that really matters. And I found out through, man, years of this, that no one ever cares about church budget or how they're going to get a new boiler to keep everybody warm, or the carpets wore out here. Nobody cares about that. If they care about arguing what color the carpet will be. No one will care about the boiler because that's back in a closet somewhere. But when it comes to the unimportant things, oh my goodness gracious! I just hope that Britisher, while we're here, and did you look, mate? We're like 96 pi. So a few people out there in church today. It's nice. It is nice. And because of that, because of the work that we've done, I would like to spend some time on what color the carpet will be, and I'll laugh about that. But I would also like to spend I hope I'm not being too ambiguous either, but I would also like to spend a huge amount of time on what kind of boiler are we going to have? You know, what kind of world do we want? I just told you, Brett, we have people, there are people out there right now that use the word admire when they talk about you. They say they admire you. That doesn't come with a small thing, bro. I'm not talking about the size of your channel or who's watching now. I'm telling you that there comes weight. Not talking about what color the drapes will be, Britisher, but deciding what kind of engine will run society. And when you start hearing things like people, you know, admire you, I know, you know, you have to take that into consideration. Not to be, and I'm definitely not trying to make you blush. I'm just saying that It's coming down to it, mate. And hopefully one or two things will happen. The whole nigger gate with, you know, PewDiePie or whatever. It's either, and I see, doesn't it seem like this is giving us our end? It doesn't seem like that was as big a deal as it would have been 3 years ago. Am I wrong?
I don't know. I think one of the reasons it's not as big a deal is simply because I think one has cried wolf too many times. But that doesn't stop them from crying wolf. So at one moment, it doesn't seem to have the impact of scandal anymore. But that doesn't actually prevent the media from still seeking to make it a scandal. So at one moment, it does seem to have improved somewhat. But in the next moment, we seem to still be in the same place we were before. Because this will only really die down once the agents who are seeking to stir things up stop trying to stir things up. Does that make sense or not?
No, it makes good sense. In fact, it makes kind of the only sense. If you want to unpack it more before I put my 2 cents in, I want you to. But no, that makes good sense. We have to have a line drawn. We have to have some, and where does that line come from? I don't know, Britisher. You can't tell me, and I can't tell you. But we have to have this distinction in our mind that says, okay, this human being said I'm a piece of garbage and they hate me and they want me to die, and they have influence in my life. So not that all their opinions really matter on who I am, but their opinions matter in that they have influence in my life. Or, man, I'm working on this thing with got both of those, and I don't want to do more than an hour, Britisher, but I don't know how I'm going to do the next video I'm working on right now without it being 45 minutes to an hour long, because it's the last couple of interviews that Hillary Clinton has given. And we have to have this line drawn. This affects me. This doesn't affect me. That could bring the long diatribe I was about to go into down to that. And what I mean by that is Britisher's ideas, the Ogre's ideas, Common Sense guy, he has some great videos out. Let's go even deeper than that. Well, no, I'm not going to start throwing names out there because I was just going to throw some names out that I hate. So I'm not going to throw any names. But we have these ideas coming out there. Do they affect your life? I don't. Look, really, I'm running out of wind because my brain in the last few days has been just going on overdrive. All of the free time. I woke up 2 mornings ago or so, and the first thing I thought was, you got to be kidding me. Because all I could think of was Jennifer Lawrence saying that the hurricane was because of people voting for Trump, man. Britt, it seems that there will be no end of not drawing the line. And people, and the line could go, and this goes to supernatural, and it just happens, the whole 9 yards. Logic, okay, let me just say this to make it easy before I go and start talking about the Rothschilds. Would you like me to start talking about the 13 families? But
no, I think we best stay away from the 13 families.
So instead, in lieu of that, let me just say that the line could be drawn this way: logical and illogical. And people want to try to blur that line, but we could aspire to the position where that line can't be blurred, where we only present logical ideas. That's why, even though I love that stuff I was going to go into, I don't know, Brett, man. Look, there's a lot of things to think about in life. Some of them don't matter. Some of the things that really matter to me is what I was just joking about. Is the world round or flat? Yeah, that really matters to me. I don't care who thinks I'm crazy. It really matters. Chemtrails. Are they contrails or chem? That really matters to me. HARP. Is there HARP? Is that a thing? I mean, the MK Ultra, is that real? But I want to draw that line, Britt, and say that those things that I think about and I ponder in my life, let me just ask you bluntly. I don't think it'd even take you long to answer me. How much are they actually affecting my life in a real way from an outsider standpoint?
What do you mean exactly from an outsider standpoint?
Well, from someone that I don't think you're on the boat that they are shooting aluminum dioxide up in the sky to change the weather patterns and to, all the things that I just mentioned. I don't think that you and I would line up on them. But how much are they really affecting my? Is Bilderberger out there? I'm telling you, I'm going to draw you into it. It's a good stream. Is Bilderberger really out there affecting my life? Is it something happening? Is this the same line that we need to draw between feminism and reality?
Well, when it comes to what affects our lives, I mean, one of the obvious ones would be governments and their actions. The other one is ideas, because ideas, as we have seen with feminism and we've seen with, the entire social justice movement, they can kind of infiltrate, and they can infiltrate everything. So those sort of ideologies whereby people who publish the wrong sort of memo at Google can get fired, that is where you can see something that at first begins purely as an abstract somewhere at a university, eventually getting ever and ever greater traction. And suddenly, and I think in some cases it is, suddenly, because one becomes aware of it. There is a tipping point at which one suddenly notices, well, hang on a moment, where did this come from? There is this moment where suddenly it is everywhere. It is in government. You can hear governments introducing laws for feminist reasons, for reasons of social justice, or one of their favorite lines, because this sort of thing has no place in society today. You can also hear it in the public relations verbiage that comes out of big corporations. You can see it in broadcasters, not merely in the media as they report the news, but so too in the media as to when it comes to comedy and drama, what things is one not allowed to make fun about anymore? If one has a program on Vikings, does one need to have black Vikings in there? Those concerns, which hitherto simply didn't exist, now suddenly are topics of great importance. And that is where it begins to influence your life, even though it started out as something abstract that was miles and miles away from you. So as such, these ideas do have a great reach upon us. But I'm not sure whether, Bilderberg meetings and things like that, whether they necessarily impact us to the extent that people, those people who really follow it intensely, that it really influences to the extent that those people think. Because I think very often one overestimates the effect that certain individuals or certain corporations or even certain governments can have. Because in the end, the levers of power are a sort of odd thing. Very often they're actually being pulled more as a kind of mass movement rather than by one particular individual here or there. Some people may take credit for it. Some people, may try to appear a little more powerful than they are. Others have more power ascribed to them that they really hold. But in the end, I think many of us actually just are, even the most powerful, even the richest, are actually just swimming around in a sea with air filled full of fog.
Where is the power? Where is the power that we see now ascribed from? And if I got to, let me clarify that by saying the power that you and I oppose right now, the feminist, the theocracy, the whole, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
where is that power? Where is that coming from, mate? Where?
The power lies within the argument. The power lies within the idea, and with society not yet having properly found a means by which to deal with it. Because our societies are essentially, they are freedom loving, they are justice loving, they wish everybody to be equal. And this particular idea is a bit like a virus. It exploits an area where our immune system is weak. We don't really have a proper response to it. So even though it is complete nonsense, it uses the language of liberty, of freedom, of tolerance, of justice. And that makes it very, very hard to combat it. Because if you're against that, then you are against liberty, you're against freedom, you're against tolerance, you're against justice, you're against treating people decently and honestly. And that is what makes it so hard for society as a whole to actually find a proper response to this, because it almost requires us to find a kind of different language whereby we can speak of liberal values that mean truly liberal values and not those merely claiming to be.
Right. Well, because what you just said is the side you just told me that the side they purport to take is what gives them this power, not necessarily what they stand for.
Well, this is just it. I think they themselves even believe that they are liberal and they are doing good. This is just it. The danger comes not so much from any particular driving agent or agency or person. It comes from within the idea itself. And it's almost as if we kind of need to absorb the initial blow and then find a way in which to actually handle this new threat to our societies. Because clearly it is a threat. Here is something that is trying to undermine the very ways in which our societies work.
Oh, no. Clearly it's a threat.
And yet it, on first impression, at first glance, it seems to be something that is merely purporting to make people equal, to treat them fairly, to treat them decently. You hear a lot, for example, you may have come across this, that people are being told, oh, social justice is largely just a matter of treating people decently, of, this opposition to free speech. It is merely a matter of decency, of not allowing the abuse of people, verbal abuse of people. So again, it is always an appeal to decency. It is always an appeal simply to moderate your ways for the sake of civility. But of course, within that lies venom, because the means by which this is supposed to be achieved is do as we say or else, which is, of course, as illiberal as you could possibly get.
Yeah.
But therein lies the problem. And the problem, I believe, simply comes from the idea itself, not from anybody who is specifically seeking to undermine us. It's people are literally falling for this.
Well, and we see right now in Boston with Antifa marching down the streets, 30,000 strong. We see all over where they're being unmasked and they're seeing who they are, Britt. And these are, with all respect to this demographic, they are 18 to 28, the majority of them.
Oh, yes, undoubtedly.
They're out there. They don't have, I don't want to take away from the wisdom of this decade, this 10-year, this DESA group that I'm using, this 18 to 20. I'm not trying to take away from them. I'm just saying that they're out there. They're trying to make it like this is society, and we must not only bow, but if one will not recognize that this is the virtuous path, This is the only path that one could take and still sleep soundly at night. There's no way on earth you can't be a member of Antifa and be racist. You can't be black and be racist. Heaven forbid. We have to protect all of the people coming into the United States of America illegally as long as they come from south of the border. We must protect dreamers as long as these kids come from south of the border. What about a child from Great Britain, Scandinavia, anywhere else that came with their family? Maybe their father and their mother were executives when they came here and not south of the border picking pickles. And they went to our schools. They were part of our society. Should now everyone get a free pass? This line that's being drawn is being drawn by a pack of, what'd you call them, Britt? Ne'er-do-wells. This pack of people that want so hard to do right, but they can't do right, is what I would say. They can't do right, but the British used a much better term, ne'er-do-wells. Isn't that how you said it, Brett? How do you say that?
Ne'er-do-wells.
Yeah, ne'er-do-wells. In other words, they can't do good, right?
Well, I think we've kind of reached a good point at which perhaps we can sort of, slowly draw this to a close, Mr. Ogre, don't you think?
Sounds good to me, Brett.
Because my cup of cocoa is most certainly empty. So
my final word is so long-winded that it is very wise of you to wrap it up soon.
I think it may be time for me kind of to hand over to you for your final summation.
Oh Lord, do me like that. Let me hit my vaporizer at least once.
Go ahead. All those vital vitamins and minerals being taken in there.
Well, you know what? As usual, we are our own worst enemies, and I just displayed that, because if I hadn't said a bloody bleeding word to my co-host and my good friend, the Britisher, I would have been able to hit this 3 or 4 more times than the 2 I'm going to now, because he probably would have said a word or 2 before absolutely leaning in to my final word. And I'm going to give it to y'all. The Britisher and I, we do something unique. Doesn't always feel good, even to me. Today is one of the days it doesn't feel good to me. But the unique thing we do is at the end of our little, whatever this is, tonight, the Britisher shit show. So if you don't like it, completely blame him. This is on his channel, after all. He gets to take all the responsibility for what's bad and none of the responsibility for what's good. Because isn't that what our society is all about? So look, without me going longer and making this more drawn out than it would be, I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to fire up Doobiegate, Britt. I just want to take this time because, again, folks, this is very sacred to us. And anybody out there listening that may one day be invited into the program, we frown on folks that would interject into the final word of anyone that would be on the Britisher and my stream, what we call church. So, Doobiegate, Britisher, thank you so much, man. I looked again today. There was another like on it. So you actually, it's not trending by any stretch of imagination with 3 likes, but you did manage to put that stream up with, you know which one, too. One I'm quite proud of. You did manage to make the most famous thing about that stream Doobiegate. I really thank you, mate. And I will say with this that I don't draw a line. I'm very thankful, folks. I have a partner in crime right now that it's hard to find someone in life in any situation that you can agree with, even if you're agreeing to disagree, even if it's time for the whale's vagina. It's very difficult to find that person. I not only found that person, this is a segue into my final word, but I found a guy that don't draw a line. We need to have lines in our lives. Those lines should come from our personal experiences. Anecdotes are no good when it comes to debate. You can't sit there and say he and she told me thus and such and therefore this and that. That just doesn't work. You go, you get a study together, you make a hypothesis, you know, you get a study together, you have your placebo group, you have your your control group, you do your due diligence. You follow the scientific method, you bring that to me. That's the kind of thing I believe. We're not experiencing that this day and age, folks. We are seeing a wholesale destruction of reasonable thought, not of common knowledge, of which there is none. Common knowledge, it doesn't exist. It's something that is an oxymoron. We don't have knowledge that we commonly hold. You learn things. I'm going to put it this way, Brett, before I go on for an hour. It resides in each one of our hands to grant the people around us, whether that be in cyberspace or in actual space, the same deference that we would like. If you think that everyone should have health care, I don't even want to get into it. If you think, let me put it this way, if you think that Ben Shapiro shouldn't go and speak at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, has anybody seen what's happened now? They got choppers. Laura Southern's there. She can't even talk. Everywhere you look, there's cops. Everywhere you look, there's freaking police. Now, and I stand with the Britisher. They need to crack skulls. But it's come to this. I'm going to pass it to you now, Britt, and say this. We up here on the cyber pass, we here where the air is rare and where the population is thin, we are the only line of defense left on this earth. And I'm not trying to overstate it. I'm not trying to be grandiose or take any position that I may have with the Britisher and overblow it. I'm telling you the truth. You will not find reality at the BBC. You will not find reality at CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. None of them. They're all pundits out to fool you. Draw the line where your conscience tells you to. At that, Britisher, I will end it.
Well, thanks a lot for that. Well, you know, in my final word, I think I'll sort of try and tie it into sort of some of the places we've gone before in this live stream, and that is that, how shall we say, it is important that we kind of try and work out what our societies are for, sort of whence they came. You know, how did we actually end up with our societies being what they are? Why are our societies so wealthy? Why are we the most sophisticated parts of the world? It is so easy to basically attribute everything the West has ever achieved to exploitation and imperialism and racism and all the other negatives that kind of get ascribed to us, without ever remembering that we also had the Enlightenment. We also had the Industrial Revolution. We created the idea of the freedom of press and free modern media. All of it came from us, and that therefore these nations which we have are actually something extremely precious, should be cherished, because they are not the kind of oppressors of the masses as it is always described. We are quite the opposite. We are the few places on earth in which the masses, the individuals, can actually flourish and prosper without there always being the grasping hand of power from above. And there are only a few things that apply, you know, a few rules that people just need to remember. Certain things that we do like hold elections, but also certain things we do not do. Certain things which, if you want to be a part of this club, you can't do. Certain opinions, effectively, which, yes, of course, you are entitled to hold, but in which, if you hold those opinions, you perhaps might want to start asking yourself if you are a part of this world. And I think we find that in our mad bombers who try to blow up, who try to blow up tube trains in London, who still seem to be living in what to us were the religious wars of the 15th century, Catholic against Protestant, in which we somehow felt it was perfectly all right to, burn the heretics to death. This is no longer the world in which we live. This is a world from which we have moved away. We have become greatly more sophisticated than that. And it doesn't matter whether you are not a Christian and therefore this whole Protestant and Catholic moniker doesn't apply to you. You either subscribe to that rule, or you really need to start asking yourself whether you are in the right place. So you can perfectly well be a Sikh, a Jew, a Hindu, a Muslim, a follower of Shinto or Buddha, I don't care. As long as you kind of realize that in these societies, there are certain ways in which we do things. And it is precisely due to our doing these ways. It is precisely due to our doing things these ways that our nations have ended up being where they are, basically at the very top of the tree. So there must be something right about these ways. And this does not only apply to those people who would kind of, set themselves against us with violence, but it also applies to this whole social justice movement that seems determined to paint us as the worst of the wrongdoers, when in fact we are precisely the opposite on this planet. And so too they would start arguing against something as precious as free speech, which, if they were ever to get that, then no sooner were their opponents silenced, people like the ogre and myself, you could pretty much count the days on one hand after our having been silenced. They would be next themselves. They just do not seem to understand. Maybe it is due to the ignorance of history that they just do not seem to understand how these things work out. They always work out badly. Revolutionaries don't tend to survive very long once the revolution has finished. But so too, all those countries that have actually stayed on the path of enlightenment are precisely those countries that have done best in history. And I don't know, sometimes one comes close to despairing when one hears them talking, particularly with the vehemence. I mean, many of you will have seen that photograph of somebody actually burning a free speech sign and, flipping a finger towards it. And you look at it and you see a complete disdain, but so too also an illustration of perfect ignorance. That's where we just somehow, as societies, as nations, we somehow have to refortify ourselves. We somehow have to start teaching just these basic rules of what it means to be part of our society, so that perhaps the next generation won't be quite as prone to, well, for want of a better word, sheer stupidity than this one. But anyway, I think I've rambled for long enough, so I will leave it so simply with telling the ogre that his channel is now at 1,011 subscribers. and call it a day there. So, ladies and
Thank you so
gentlemen,
much for that. Thank you.
that's all.
I gotta say, wait, hold it. All jokes aside, thank you everybody for subbing. It means more to me than I will ever let on. Thank you, Brett.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's all from the Cyberpass for now. Thank you very much, and goodbye.